Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friends Show. I am your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Terence Corrigan. Terence, how are you doing?
Good, Nick, good.
It's a very muted good, but I suppose it is a Monday after all.
It's a
and of
Monday,
course, Ms. Sargon. Sarah, how are you doing this magnificent Monday in sunny South Africa?
Well, I was thinking whether we could sort of advertise and sell muted Mondays.
Maybe we should. I think it would be very much in keeping with the mood of things. Right. Speaking of which, let us get into something that I think we've talked about in passing, but we haven't really dived into too much. And it kind of seems to have come to a head this weekend, and that is the chaos in which the ANC's electoral lists are in. So there were some rumors circulating over the past couple of weeks that at least one of the reasons why the ANC was so in favor of postponing the municipal elections and had been encouraging the IEC to do so was because they had not sorted out their list of candidates for the local government election, a process that every single time it happens always causes fighting and chaos inside the ANC. And often you get that one magnificent sight of the ANC marching on the ANC to demand that the ANC do something. And thus it seems to have happened again. Over the weekend, the ANC was finalizing its candidate lists, and already a number of its own branches have lodged complaints saying that the candidate lists, so which of its members are going to be elected as councillors, has been manipulated by party leaders. Branches in Northwest Province, Bonjala region are considering legal action against the party in a bid to reverse the lists handed over to the ANC's NEC. On Sunday, the ANC was still having big meetings to try and consolidate its lists. There were people threatening to sue each other. It's a big fight. In Gauteng, hundreds of members of the ANC from Hammanskraal marched to the ANC's headquarters to hand over a memorandum where they accused the ANC's accused the ANC's interim provincial committee of having manipulated their candidate lists. And if this follows the pattern of how these disputes usually go, I suspect that there will probably be service delivery protests at some point connected to unhappiness around this kind of thing. So, Sarah, firstly, what do you make of this? And secondly, I mean, one of the theories I've heard for why people get so upset over candidate lists isn't just, vying for power or that kind of thing. But when it comes to councillors, for a lot of people, it's literally the difference between having no income and a very healthy middle class income. What do you make of it, Sarah?
That does appear to be a very, very solid reason, and I think it would cause antipathies and contestation. And this has been a problem. This has been the problem with the ANC, elections concerning the ANC for forever. It's also led to in some areas, significant number of murders where one faction wants to get rid of another faction's choice or vice versa, and it happens before, during, and sometimes after elections. Clearly, the ANC's needed another model. I mean, it was also one of the big issues at the elective conference in 2017 was the fact that on some occasions a nomination would be agreed at branch level. You get to the actual event, and whoever's meant to put it forward puts forward somebody else entirely. So to say that it's an unreliable system is an understatement. But one does get the feeling that jockeying for power and dishonesty and murder have not budged the ANC on its methodology. But the fact that they may go into an election without enough candidates, that might have actually put something under them, because the weekend was business as usual. I mean, we've seen this before, court actions, and very often those court actions have been successful. So clearly the finucane is not very subtle. And the ANC is now it's having to face its own process, and B is having to face the fact that it had assumed the election would somehow be postponed, and failed to deal with the process sooner rather than later. And look at how things are now.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I, for what it's worth, on that question of whether people are pushing for these jobs so aggressively because of their own, ability to the financial rewards of them. I mean, if consider you're someone who maybe has a very low end public works job, earning sort of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 rand a month, and you get the opportunity to become an ANC councillor, and that can net you. I've been a councillor before, 30,000 rand a month in a municipality, in a metro. In the rural areas, it's quite a lot less. You can get like sort of 20,000 rand a month kind of thing. And I think it actually shows how desperate people are in a lot of places. That for a lot of people, this is really the only hope they're ever going to have of joining the middle class. Terence, do you have any comments on this subject and just really this whole issue in general?
Well, a couple of years ago, my child used to be very fond of Disney movies, and I remember the line from Aladdin where the parrot Iago says, "I think I'm going to keel over and die from not surprised." I just think that's this happens every time. Brian Pottinger, in his very interesting book, The Mbeki Legacy, spoke about how the ANC did not have the skills and the expertise to run itself, let alone the state. And this, I think, is just something that has been borne out again and again. And yes, we will see service delivery protests, quite possibly. But this also speaks to, I think, something a little bit beyond what you said about the about politics being a route into the middle class, or the only kind of firing step that you have to get there. It's the fact that, and once again, I'm plagiarizing by Brian Pottinger here, the ability to sort of advance to a higher level of modernity, where people don't need to see access to the state as being their ticket forward. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if over the last decade we've moved in any way closer to that sort of objective, or we've just regressed, because access to the state is simply the most lucrative thing that most of us are going to have access to. And as the real economy sort of crumbles, and many of South Africa's most productive citizens of all races and creeds and ages are pushed to consider immigration, or at any rate working offshore. I mean, what does one expect going forward? And this is unfortunately a pattern that has been repeated in many developing countries around the world. Extraction from what can be garnered easily without entrepreneurial endeavor. The parasitic bourgeoisie, or the bureaucratic bourgeoisie. And I don't know. I think that if it wasn't the ANC's direct intention, it was the entirely predictable consequence of the way that it has governed, or you go one step back, it has approached the governance of the country, which in many ways is a rehash of Kwame Nkrumah's injunction that if you get the political kingdom, you sort of get everything that comes with it. And it's just not how a modern society functions. And
exactly.
there are places across Africa where that lesson is being learned. You're seeing independent business, an independent business class emerging in places like Ghana, even benighted Nigeria. But I really don't think that we have in the ANC a political movement which has the breadth of vision to even begin to understand that. Tragic, but there we are.
I must say that ever since I cut myself off from the ambrosia of the state's largesse, my finances have not quite been the same. So, sorry, I guess the other question is, I think, we've seen fighting over ANC candidate lists cause problems for the party before. I think before the 2016 municipal election, the ANC branches in Tshwane objected to the ANC's candidate for mayor in the city. And so there was actually a march, I think, and a shutdown and all sorts of things. Do you think that this might hurt them electorally?
I think what will, I don't know if it'll hurt them. If this is what will hurt them electorally, because people will still perceive it as the means, as you say, to an income and to a certain amount of power. But I think I think there's plenty else that will affect them electorally. But I think what's now happening is that there's less certainty that the money will be forthcoming, because the money is running out, if it hasn't run out already. So it's all very well to have granted a sort of an increase to public servants this year, but I wouldn't bet the house on continuing to receive anything. And the chaos that goes with this whole system is just going to be exacerbated by the fact that funds are no longer guaranteed.
Definitely.
But I think I think that your voter would need to draw that connection between the ANC, its deficiencies in governance, its internal elections, and the sort of welfare measures that come out the end. I think as much as we can be scathing, and I think rightly so, about the performance of the ANC. I think for many people at the bottom of South Africa's socioeconomic pile, social grants mean an irreplaceable lifeline. I think, and as long as that can be delivered, and the things like the housing and whatever, deficient and inadequate as it may be, it's something. It's better. It's a means of survival that they would not that they would not otherwise have, and in a sense, then their voter choice is entirely rational.
Indeed, so. Right, let us move on to our next topic for today, and that is, of course, I'm sure at least some people in our audience have probably had a brush with this, the problem of renewing one's driver's license. So during COVID, a lot of traffic offices were closed, especially during the initial parts of the lockdown, and then the expiry deadlines for renewing your license, which I think you have to do every 5 years, was extended. And those extensions are about to come to an end, and yet many people are still struggling to renew their licenses. We're seeing now that you have to book, at least in Gauteng, online in order to be able to renew your license. But the booking system seems to have very few slots available. It seems to be very difficult. It seems to be fairly chaotic. And a lot of people are, shall we say, making lemonade out of the situation by selling what is advertised as help, but actually seems to probably be something closer to corruption. If you go to a licensing center, people will outside offer to sort out the license for you for about 400 Rand. There was a report by Eyewitness News who went to the Randburg License Testing Center, and someone basically approached them and said, "Hey, I can sort out your license for you. No trouble, 300 Rand up front and then 100 Rand on delivery of the license." And there seems to be a widespread flourishing of corruption in the dysfunction of the system. And a lot of people are now saying the only way I can avoid being in violation of not having a legal license is to pay bribes. Terence, what do you make of this?
Well, Karl Marx said something about the withering away of the state, and I think in many ways South Africa is testimony to that. Maybe with a cabinet that's top heavy and communist, we should say this is entirely predictable. Okay. First of all, I would like to say that I renewed my car license disc through the Cresta Post Office. A big shout out! I think those guys do a wonderful job. I just really feel for them that they have to be sitting atop the dysfunctional organization that goes on in the back and have to deal with people screaming at them about their package that got lost, because there's really nothing they can do about it. But I'm always very polite to them, and they did that. As far as your actual driver's license go, yeah, no, it's a massive problem, and I have had experience of that. This was about 2 years ago. I needed to renew. I went through all the bells and whistles. Then I went back a couple of months later to pick it up, and they said, "Oh, oops, yeah, there was a mistake capturing your photograph." And I said, "You guys have got this like SMS system, haven't you? Couldn't someone tell me?" No, we don't tell people. You just come back and find out. It's potluck. So yes, I had to go through the whole thing again, and second time, right? Although I did make sure I made them show me the picture. So is that okay? Is that an all right picture? So this is hardly a new thing. Now, on those fixes outside, once again, I want to talk about Brian Pottinger. In his book, and this was published, I think, in 2008 or 2009, he talked about the shadow state. And he said this is not some sort of Da Vinci Code a conspiracy. This is, in one sense, it's the way the middle class privatizes itself out. So you have your private security companies, but it's also those armies of fixers and go-betweens that hang around outside Home Affairs and will offer to sort you out. And these are basically people who've learned to game the system, and in some ways have learned to operate within that system more efficiently than the bureaucrats. And he says, and understand, this isn't the kind of guy who will queue for your passport. This is a guy he's got a way into the back, and he can go and get all the stamps on your forms because he knows the people, and he'll pay them, in whatever small concession they want, and he will deliver a service. That describes a kind of bureaucratic breakdown that is well advanced. It's kind of when cancer has become the body. And I fear that you reach that sort of point. Maybe it is past the point of no return, and somehow in order to address it, you've kind of got to start again. Although I really have no idea how you do that, or you just sort of accept that this is kind of the way the wheels are greased in society. That comes at a massive ideological cost, because if you can justify, I'll pay $100 to John out in the parking lot, who dashes inside, and half an hour later he comes back with a card for me. What sort of moral claim do I have to criticize, a guy who's doing that with a tender? It's not an empirical difference. It is a difference of scale.
Right. That's sort of, and I think that's a very good point about how corruption kind of bleeds through the whole society until basically everyone is complicit to some degree, and that's probably why corruption is able to go on for so long in many societies.
Let me just make one other observation. Time magazine in the early 1960s wrote a scathing critique of Hendrik Verwoerd's policies in South Africa, quite justified. The thing that struck with me about that article, which I only read about 10 years ago, I was not alive in the early 60s, for all of those wondering how I looked this good. They said that independent Africa is proving Dr. Verwoerd wrong, and the thing that stuck with me was saying, in Nigeria, despite a chaotic political climate, its excellent civil service is keeping the country going. That was the perception of Nigeria back in the back in the early 60s. You would struggle to find any Nigerian who would not laugh very loudly and rudely at that suggestion these days.
Yes, I can imagine so.
Once you go beyond a certain point, it's difficult to row back.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah, what do you make of what Terence just said, particularly that stuff about the shadow state? And also assume for a moment that you were made Grand High Imperial Empress of South Africa's licensing systems. What would you do to fix things?
Terence is. I agree with what Terence has said, and as the Grand High Priestess of Waters, whatever, I would fire everybody, close them down, rejig, and reopen a few months later, because I did the same thing 2 years ago, and I couldn't get my. It was just before the booking system came in, and I couldn't get my actual thing for about 3 or 4 months. I think it was 4 months. Because the people who made the licenses were on strike because they were being treated badly by the management who had outsourced.
And the same thing with passports once, eh? The print deposit broke down.
But look, the system is broken. If you look at the state of the Randburg office, which I know well, it looks. For those people to have to work in that environment where blinds are broken and tiles are broken and doors are broken, that is indicative of the quality of management. And I would probably actually leave.
It's not going to raise morale, is it?
No, exactly. I'd leave the people sort of on the ground, and I would dismiss the management, because usually terribleness is a function of management. But there's another element to it that's dispiriting for let's call us the man in the street, and that is when you deal with this sort of bureaucracy, you end up being polite and almost unctuous to people who are treating you with such disdain and loathing. And because there's nothing you can do about how quickly or how well or how fast or how slowly they get their service out. But to make sure that you aren't in any way disadvantaged by losing your cool, you don't lose your cool, and you behave politely to people who you shouldn't have to behave politely to, or you shouldn't have to behave impolitely to, because they're doing their jobs. But they are completely hamstrung in the sense of everything they are provided, not least of all their environment. The equipment is out of date, some of it is failing. People are taking sick leave left, right, and centre, so they are understaffed all the time. And at the end of the day, that comes down to management. And I suspect, in reality, the difference between the relative competence of the private sector and the general incompetence of the public sector is about training and being trained. And again, it comes to part of what state capture is all about, which is having people who are not trained to go into the job and are not trained properly once they're in it.
Yeah, no, I think that point is very important about managers. I knew a guy who's I think he's run his own business for a while, and he told me once that he thinks that the great crisis in South Africa is a lack of quality managers, although he believed that this also infected the private sector. It's obviously worst in the public sector, where so many appointments are made on political grounds.
By
Terence,
considerable multitudes of magnitudes, or whatever the term is. Multiples.
No, absolutely. Look, and I also think that there is some merit in being being cautious about thinking that layering technology on top is going to solve it.
No,
the idea that you get to make your bookings online. Ooh, that sounds great, until the system doesn't work. It's always the system that doesn't work. And you discover that there is simply no option to go and speak to a living, breathing human being who might, be able to open up a paper book and say, okay, I have a spot here. Look, I had an issue like that with my with my COVID vaccination. That I was busy. I was making an online booking and I got kicked out, and there was literally nobody who could help me. So I was kind of I was registered enough so that the system said I'm already in it, but not registered so that I actually had a booking. And it was like, seriously, so how do we move from being unvaccinated to being vaccinated? Yeah.
Well, can I just say, I see there's a comment in the chat about, just as well we can laugh about it or we throw ourselves off a building. The problem is, my experience with most of the buildings is the lifts don't work. So if you're prepared to walk 5, 6, 7, or 8 flights of stairs, maybe you wouldn't. If you have the energy to throw yourself off the building, good luck to you.
Yeah. Look. Yeah, but the atmosphere in those buildings is often just like you it's kind of like kind of like 100 years of aggression and anger and frustration that's just etched itself into the plaster. You know, it's generations of people who hated being there, that just left the psychic imprint. You know, that you can bring in Peter Jackson to come and make a movie about it. It'd be scarier than The Omen.
All right, let's move on to our last story for today. I don't know if we'll have enough time to properly cover it, but it actually kind of connects to this one, right? The place of technology. So a guy called Michael Williams, who is a 65-year-old black man from the United States, was arrested more than a year ago for allegedly being involved in the murder of a young man. The key piece of evidence in his trial was a new technological system that has been rolled out across cities around the United States called ShotSpotter, which now I don't fully understand how it works, but basically it uses algorithms and AI to work out where gunshots came from, right? Who shot who where, based off of the sound that it carries and that it picks up by its microphones. So basically, you've got these microphones kind of are in public areas around the cities, and if they hear a gunshot, then they sort of can calculate roughly where the gunshot came from. So it's been described by some US law enforcement people as being a game changer because it helps them to kind of really connect gunshots to crimes, because obviously if they show up later and they know there was a gunshot here and they saw this person there at that time, it helps to create evidence. Unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of problems with the system. Researchers and judges and various groups have criticized this technology for being unreliable, for apparently in some cases not picking up shots, in other cases needing to have human input to determine whether it was a gunshot or something like a truck backfiring. In other cases, it misidentified various sounds as in fact being gunshots, and so created false reports. And so this particular man who is found guilty of this murder, Michael Williams, after a year of being in prison, his case was thrown out and he was released, as the judge said that the evidence against him was very weak and not nearly sufficient for a conviction. So I guess the real question here is, to what role should some of this tech really be playing in something as important as criminal justice? Sort of sounds like a good idea, right? A system that can identify gunshots. But if it doesn't work properly, well, it's a little bit like the booking thing for licenses, except instead of having an expired license, you might send an innocent person to jail. What do you think, Terence?
Yeah. The word I keep on hearing ringing in the back of my head is Skynet. You know, the Terminator series. In the 1980s, that was futuristic, and I mean, yeah, it was made for a good movie. I think advances in artificial intelligence actually make something like that. You know, computers that can learn and can exercise a great deal of influence inherently possible. What scares me, and I think what this case brings out, is outsourcing those sort of investigative functions, things that concern justice and people's life chances and whatever, to impersonal machines. I mean, can you imagine a gunshot spotter in Joburg? The thing would blow up from overuse within half an hour. You know, that's before my neighbor's dysfunctional car and whatever, has contributed. It's so yeah, this concerns me. It's taking technology which should help to sharpen those processes, to assist people to do their jobs, and to make the determinations we make more exact, and almost, as I say, outsourcing it. We should I think we should be very, very cautious with technological progress. And I mean, I'm not a Luddite or anything. I think that I can't imagine getting by without the internet. And I mean, seriously, like I'm talking about a stage of 15 minutes, which may say something. But to ensure that there are always competent human beings who can make make well-informed human decisions at the at the helm. And I think this also goes back into what we were just talking about. There's a big part of me that wishes we could get those bureaucrats from Nigeria in the early 1960s back, because they might have been used to working with paper and pen, but they probably understood their rules and how to manage actual flesh and blood people.
Sarah, in 30 seconds or so, your thoughts.
I'm just surprised that a new technology like this, which isn't the how it works isn't accessible to the public, should have the ability in a court of law to determine beyond reasonable doubt that somebody's guilty of a crime, particularly if it's a crime such as murder. At best, it can be of assistance, but you've got to have other evidence to support it. It's not like DNA evidence, which is absolutely proven at this point. So. But America's a scary place. The American judicial system's a scary place.
No, a lot of if you can look into that, a lot of people don't ever go to trial, even they just plead guilty because of how their system works. Anyway, for another day.
Yeah, but Nick and I were discussing this the other day. So much of what we just assume as our private life is no longer private because we conduct so much of it through technology. I mean, we were chatting about this one video with this lady saying that she's being stalked by someone she knew, and she's using a new name now. Seriously, you think that having an unofficial alias is going to protect you?
No,
really?
Exactly. All right, that is all the time we have for today. So thank you very much for listening. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Please comment, like, subscribe, all those good things. Please leave us reviews on iTunes and Spotify and wherever. And we shall see you tomorrow for the Daily Friend Show. Have a good day, everyone.